Hi guys, so in this video we're just going to go through exactly how we should connect to a SQL Server Management Studio and connect to a database or create one. The prerequisites for this session is that we should already have installed a SQL Server. Now there's a massive difference between a SQL Server, which is a physical server that we download and run on our local machine, and a SQL Server Management Studio, which is a client tool. Consider a SQL Server Management Studio like you downloading Microsoft Word onto your local machine and then be able to use and write queries locally. So the two differences: SQL Server, physical server. SQL Server Management Studio is a client tool that helps us write queries and connect to databases. So how do we connect to it? So once we've downloaded SQL Server Management Studio, the latest version by the recording of this video on the official Microsoft website is 20.2, I believe. So if you download that, if you click on the start menu, if you're using a Windows laptop or computer, and then if you click on all apps or all applications and navigate down towards a folder that says Microsoft SQL Server Tools. So my one that I've downloaded is Tools 20. And then if you go down, you should see SQL Server Management Studio 20, which is the version at the moment, the latest version. So double click on that, and then this window will appear. So this is the actual SQL Server Management Studio. Now, the very first thing that we need to do is we need to be able to connect to something. What is that something? If we come over to the left-hand side, we should see this window, this white window here, which is clearly defined the Object Explorer. The Object Explorer is where we're going to have all of our defined databases, system databases, tables, views, and so on. Anything that we need to interrogate or have a look at from a data's point of view, this is where we're going to see it. So the Object Explorer is very important. If we click on that connect button at the top, we will see multiple different options. So those options, the only one that we're interested in is Database Engine. Because we're working with databases, that's where we're going to be majority of our time. There are other options in terms of that come within the SQL Server family. We will come on to those topics in later videos down the line, but all you need to know for now is there are several other options. So analysis services, integration services, reporting services, and Azure is basically the cloud, Microsoft Azure. So you have 3 or 4 main cloud providers. So Azure, which is built by Microsoft, Google Cloud, which is GCP, and Amazon Web Services or AWS. But in this instance, this section here, Azure, that's just cloud-based. So we can connect to cloud-based storage and so on, but we're not going to do that in this video. All we need to do is just click on Database Engine. So if we click on Database Engine, we come to this SQL Server connection window. We've already got the server type as Database Engine. We've selected that in the connect. The server name, there are several options of actually connecting to a server. So a physical server on your local machine or your PC, we can connect to it by actually just putting a single dot, which emphasizes that we're only connecting to our local machine. We can also type in brackets, right? We can type in local. That can also connect to our local SQL server that we're connecting to. But what I'd like to do is if we go down on this right-hand side and go browse for more, and then you'll see how many other SQL servers you've got installed. But in my instance, I've got my machine name, so desktop, whatever that number is, and my SQL server that I've got named. So if I click on that, that's my server name. One thing to note is the fact that with database servers, we can have a production server. If you're in like a regular data engineering, data analysis role or anything of that nature, some of those servers will live in a virtual machine somewhere, but multiple people, multiple developers like developer 1, developer 2, developer 3 can connect and work with the same SQL server. They can work on different databases or even the same database. They can collaborate. So you can have a single SQL server that a multitude of other developers within your team or outside of your team are working on at any given moment. That's an important point to understand. And then how do we authenticate? we've got several options of authenticating. So Windows authentication is us using our Windows credentials, our username and password that we've connected to on the actual machine, so your laptop or your computer. The other options are we can create a SQL Server authentication. So we can create on the fly an actual username and password, and that we can give it to somebody, or we can give it to a tool to be able to connect to our SQL Server. So those are the two main areas. When it comes to Microsoft Entra, any of these that says Entra, I touched on the point of Azure. So Entra is basically, it connects to our Microsoft Azure AD, which is an Active Directory, all in the cloud. We're not going to do that at this moment, but we may come into subsequent lessons where we have to touch some of those Microsoft Entra, MFA, multi-factor authentication is what it stands for. But in our scenario here, we're just going to use our Windows authentication, and then everything else just remains the same. We might have to check this to say trusted server certificate, and then just click connect. And once we connect, you see the difference here. Now we have multiple different options inside of our Object Explorer. The very first thing is here, we have the server name. We've connected to this actual server, the SQL Server that we're working with. Under databases, so if we expand that, there's actually a plus sign here. Anything that we want to do within SQL Server Management Studio, we have to press the expand. So we expand that. At the moment, we've only got system databases. So if we expand system databases, we get 4 main system databases. So master, model, MSDB, and tempDB. These 4 here, we don't actually need to do anything with. They come under the hood once we download a SQL Server. These are all system databases. They are not a user database that has been created by us. That's an important point to understand. These are almost considering and taking all of the metadata under the hood, under the engine itself. We don't have to, we'll come on to subsequent lessons where we will see what these actually do in due time, but rest assured that these are not user created databases. These are system databases. Now, that's all at the moment for this scenario. If we want to create or write any queries or coding, at the top here you'll see a button that says new query, right? So the way to do this, we can either press Control-N or we can press on this button, and if we press this button, we get a new white window here. It will just appear, and this is our query window. So this is where we're going to be writing some of our code if we want to be able to execute anything, right? So this is where we're going to be writing majority of our code. So that's a query window. And if we write, so if I do select 1 or select 2, and if we want to execute it, there's 2 ways of executing it or running the actual query or the code. We have a button that is directly below the new query window, execute. So if we press execute, we see the output here below. So I've selected 2, and then we get 2 on the output window. We can also go back and then press F5. So if we press F5, it does the same thing. So we can either press execute to run the query, or we can press F5 to also run the query as well. So that's what I wanted to just really touch on very quickly. The next lesson, we're going to go into how we can create our own user databases. And then subsequent lessons, we'll go into how we can create tables, views, and so on. So that was very quickly, just wanted to break that down. I'll see you in the next one.